And we're back in the forest and the sun is coming through the trees. Look at that, look at that. What a beautiful day. A little bit chilly, so I got the hood up and the wind's blowing. Not so bad. When should you put up the rent, and how often should you put up the rent, and how much should you put up the rent? All very good questions to ask. And I like YouTube videos because I got a little bit more time to explain, as opposed to trying to cram everything into 180 seconds in a reel. April, just quite soon, they're having a march in London. All the lazy, work-shy socialists are all coming out and saying they want rent control. Well, not being funny, you already got it. It's called a free market economy. And in this free market economy, rents dictate themselves. And when you start messing with a free market economy, it's no longer a free market economy. And intervention normally means it's going to turn into a cluster. That's what tends to happen. That's what kind of happens with everything. So our free market economy, which is already in existence, it controls rents. If I have a rent and we use round figures and say it's £1,000, if I say I'm going to increase the rent and I'm going to put it up from 1,000 to 2,000, someone's going to say, well, don't be stupid. First of all, I'm not going to pay it, and now I'm going to leave, because that's stupid, isn't it? Well, is it? Well, yeah, it is. That's what a free market economy is. You're free to do as you wish, and so is the tenant free to do as they wish. So they would just leave. Now, actual mandatory controls are still in place. They're in place right now. You can appeal a rent. People don't tend to do it because it's a lengthy process and it's easier to just find somewhere else. But you can go to a tribunal and you can appeal your rent right now. Out comes the Renters Reform Bill, where they're saying now you can only put up rent once a year, and you can appeal your rent. Well, you can appeal your rent now. So why are they saying that? Well, it's just a bit of a vote catcher, isn't it? Yeah, the tenant says, yeah, we can appeal the rent. You can appeal the rent now. But when you mess with the free market economy, that always produces a problem. And in my view, when you specify you can only put up the rent once a year, all the socialists say, yeah, once a year, yeah, power to the tenant. It's not that easy. As a matter of fact, I don't think it's a very good idea. Now, I don't put up rents anywhere near once a year. As a matter of fact, the longest one I think was about 5 years. I was speaking to somebody the other day, it was like 7 or 8 years, seven years, and they didn't put the rent up at all. And what tends to happen is, if you hike rents, and if you do it all the time, you're going to get a lot of void periods. And so you put the rent up from 1,000 to 1,001 or 1,002, and then 6 months time you do it again, and then for £100, the tenant gets miffed, they don't want to do it. What then happens is they leave, and then you get these huge void periods. Well, if you're only getting an extra £100 a month, and you got 2 months of voids, well, you got to wait 20 months to get that money back. Free market economy dictates the best way to increase a rent and when. Now, they tried this in Scotland. Oh, rent control is tried all the way over. A little bit of populist vote, a little bit of socialism creeps in, and everybody has a go at it. Yeah, rent control. And it doesn't work. What they did, all the first things that the Scottish landlords did was, some of them just got out straight away, so that decreases the stock of private rental. And don't forget, private rental is what's holding the rental sector together, because the social housing just is not even close to being ready, and it won't ever be either. And what tended to happen there is everybody put their rent up, and they whacked it up too. So I'm uncertain of the percentages, but if, say, the rent was 1,000, they didn't put it up to 1,050, they whacked it up to 1,400, and whoa, okay. And so it was a sizable jump. And then what happens is they kept putting it up every year. Now, this is important, so you need to listen to this bit, or not. It's all according to who you are, I guess. In a free market economy, when you can put the rent up whenever you want to put the rent up, there are a lot of times you don't. As I've said, I've gone 4 or 5 years without putting rents up, or 2 years without putting rents up. You just do. But if someone says you can only put it up once a year, and the tenant says, the government said you can only put it up once a year, so you put it up once a year. What happened in Scotland was, like I said, everybody whacked the rent up, and then once a year they kept putting the rent up. Now over, I think, a 5-year period, you have to Google this yourself. I would put a link in the bottom, but I'm in a forest, so I don't know. What happened is they put the rents up, and then each year they put the rents up because they had to, because they could only do it once a year. And then what happened is that when they compared England to Scotland, England had increased 22% over a 5-year period, and Scotland had increased 25% over a 5-year period, because they were was mandatory, they could only do it once a year. So they messed with the free market economy. And free market economy is no longer free. So don't mess with the free market economy. So how often should you put the rent up? Well, that depends on you, and it depends on your tenant. If you've got a tenant that's been there 10 years, and I've got a tenant that's, obviously I'm not going to say who it is, where it is, or what type of place it is either, but she's been with us a long time. She must be with us 15, 16, 17 years. And she was paying well under market value for her place. I looked at that and I said, we need to bounce it up. And there is a little bit of a team behind me. I don't have absolute control. I kind of do, but I listen so much to what everybody says. And everybody, we bumped it right up. So I won't tell you what it was, but say it was £1,000, I put it up to say 1,004, and that brought it under market value, but closer to what market value should be. Those aren't the figures, I just changed the figures. She contacted me, she said, listen, that's a big jump. And I said, yes, it is. So I actually went round to see her, and she said, well, the figures were, say it was keeping these same figures. She said, I can afford an extra 200, but I can't afford the 4. And I said, yeah, okay, we'll go with that. And that was really important. And I sat down in her living room, drinking tea with her, and we were friendly. And I said, listen, the reason I'm saying yes to this, and I'm saying yes so quickly and so easily, is because you've been here a long time. You know it's below market value, and it's still below market value, because it was, even with the increase that we agreed, it was well below market value. And she said yes. And she thanked me. Now that's an unusual situation. You have somebody who's thanking me for only putting up the rent a little bit. For putting up the rent, they're thanking me. Well, that's not some trick. That's not, well, ha ha ha. It's called negotiation in a free market economy, and being reasonable and good to your tenant. It's the relationship between landlord and tenant is not draconian, and if it's draconian, it's wrong. Now, I'm not saying that the relationship should be, we're going to go down the pub and have a couple of beers relationship. No. But you should have a good, sound, friendly relationship. And if you don't, then something's going wrong. And you need to address what that is. And it could be anything. Now, this girl had been with me for a long time. And it looks like she's going to be with me for a long time. Now, if that's your business model, that's brilliant. And that is my business model. I'll come on to that another time. But my business model is long term. I'm not looking at, say, short term. I'm not looking at students where it's going to be 1 year or 6 months or 7 months now. But that's another video. And so the long-term strategy is, I don't want any voids. I want her to pay the rent. Great. And that's what's happening. So if she says, I'm moving out, I then got to go into the house. I look around the house and I say, well, I got to do this, I got to do that, I got to do this, I got to do that. We got to do, yeah, And then all of a sudden I'm pulling out, what, 5, 10, maybe 15,000 to completely rehash. And then it's off the market for 3, 4 months. And then with that, I've lost all the rent. I paid the extra money. Yeah, that's a good idea, isn't it? So in this instance, I've got a tenant that is a happy tenant. They're paying below market rate, but not too much below market rate, but it's below market rate. They're happy to stay there. The place is certificated. I got all the certificates in place, so everything's happy. The boilers, the electrics, everything's good. It's warm, it's dry, it's safe. She's happy, and I got no voids. So when should I put the rent up? The Renters Reform Bill is just about to come in, and I haven't put everybody's rent up for at least a year. And when I do put rents up, I don't make these massive jumps. That example I gave you was unusual. She was so far behind, and still is behind. I never do that. So again, we use this nice round figure of £1,000 a month. If I put up the rent from 1,000 to 1,250, 1,003, that's imagine eating that into someone's income. How are they going to do it? Now, they might get some help from housing benefit or local housing allowance or universal credit now, whichever one they're on. But that's a huge chunk to make up, and I don't see how people are going to do it. And that induces voids. It induces an antisocial friendship or no friendship. So I don't do it. So what I tend to do myself, and so this is how I do it, is I make small incremental increases. So if we'll go back to the £1,000 example, I will put it up 1,050, or I'll put it up to 1,075. So someone says, can I pull out £50 extra per month? Yes, I can, because that's quite doable. What's that? £12 a week. So if someone says, yeah, I could do that, that's sort of 1 extra hour's work, isn't it? Or something like that. Or if you put it up, say £75 a month, so someone says, yeah, a month, I can do that. And so you don't induce an argument, you don't induce stress. And this is important too. Everybody believes they've got, no, they don't. I don't think everybody believes, but a lot of people believe you've got to wring out, it's a business, and you've got to wring out the maximum amount of profit. And that is not the case. That's not the case. If you wring out the maximum amount of profit, you're just gonna miff everybody off. You're gonna miff a tenant off. You shouldn't do it, in my view. I don't do it. And this is where the free market economy, if we're free to do as we wish, it's much better, in my view, that I put up the rent to in an incremental amount, a small amount. That gives me consistency. Now, consistency is vital. You can make more money through consistency, so the tenant's happy, you're happy because you're making money. The consistency means that there's no great big voids. The consistency means that the tenant says, listen, I just can't afford it, so I'm going to go into arrears. The consistency says, listen, I can't afford it, I'm out, but I got nowhere to go, so you're now going to have to force me out. You think, wow, all these different things, and somebody wants to mess around with that market. Well, that's just the way it is. But they're not really messing around with it. The new Renters Reform Bill is quite reasonable, really. So when the Renters Reform Bill says you can only put it up once a year, well, I probably will. And if we go back to the £1,000, again, it'll be like £50 a month. And this is important, so you kind of need to listen to this. If your figures that you're working on are so close with what you can put it up, that you say, unless I can put it up £200 a month, say it is a figure of 200 a month, unless I can do that, I'm going to be negative on the rent versus the mortgage. If your figures are that close, something's gone wrong. You shouldn't be that close. You should not be, as my father would say, sailing so close to the wind. You should be in a situation where you have a certain degree of buffer. And if you don't have that degree of buffer, either something's gone wrong or something has already gone wrong and you're in trouble, in which case that's different. Okay, if something has already gone wrong and you're trying to sort it out, that's great. But if you set it up like that and you still don't have a buffer, then you've set it up wrong. I'll come on to rent control in a different video, because that's a completely different, it's not completely different, but This one was, when should you put up a rent and how often and how much? In my view, the free market economy has meant that I don't put it up very often. Not only do I not put it up very often, I don't put it up very much. Bar that one example, but even then I reduced it right down. Small incremental increases in line with inflation, and inflation is running a little bit high, so we've run behind inflation. And this is in my view, so this is my view, this is not, certainly not advice. Dear Lord above, who take advice from me? In my view, I tend to always keep my rents slightly under, say 10% under market value or more. I never close the gap. So never, in my view, that's my view, never get as much as you can out of the situation. It doesn't work that way. It's a very poor method of business, in my view. Now this has paid off well for me in the past and the present, and I hope indeed the future, in as much that I like to think I'm friendly with everybody. Probably quite a few people think I'm a dickhead. Okay, that's understandable. Anybody in business is considered a dickhead, isn't it? Especially if you're a socialist. Yeah. But what tends to happen is I think I'm friends with people, and as long as I'm fair with them and I go and see them and discuss it with them, and that's important too. That's another aspect. You can't just send somebody a text, put your rent up, there you are. Be respectful when you're going to charge somebody some more money, when you're going to change the terms and conditions. Now, what I tend to do, myself, and I've been doing this a few years, is, and I'm Generation X, so I was brought up with telephone calls and meeting people. And then out came letters and emails and all the texts and social media. I've grown up with that, but it wasn't around. For me, what I tend to do whenever I'm going to put up a rent is the first thing I'll do is I will go and see them. And it is far better to sit in their living room and say, listen, we need to put your rent up. And they say, oh, okay. So then we discuss it. So if I say, yeah, it's whacking up 50%, they fall off their chair backwards and they want to spit at me and kick me out of the house. So I don't do that. So I'll sit in their living room and we'll discuss it. And again, these small incremental things, and I'll say, listen, I'm going to put it up £75. And I've done that before too. So, and we've already discussed the reasons why you get no voids and things like that. So you sit down with the person and you say, listen, I'm going to put your rent up from 1,000 to 1,075. And they say, whoa, okay, all right. And most of the time they thank you. They don't thank you because you're an ass. They thank you because you've been respectful and you haven't whacked it up to squeeze as much as you can out of the tenant. You've put it up an incremental amount that somebody can afford in line with market value. They've probably had a pay rise and it works out quite well. Then after that, what I'll tend to do is I'll put it in writing. And when I say writing, I don't mean an email, I mean on a piece of paper, a headed piece of paper explaining the rent increase and how much it's going to be and when it's going to start from. And I don't put anything new in that letter, that piece of paper letter. There's nothing new. I don't say, oh, but by the way, we didn't discuss it, but I'm going to backdate it 6 months. No, 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 no. Everything, I don't put anything new in that letter. And I don't post that letter either. Nope. I take that letter and I go and see them again. So I knock on the door. So I'll arrange to see them again, and then I'll give them the letter and I'll say, let's go through it. Everything was just as we discussed. And there it is, just as we discussed. It's going to go £75. It's going to be from 2 months' time, or it'll be from the new year. And I normally give people, I don't say it's going up next month, but that would be, I don't do that. It's normally 2 months minimum, but normally I can go 4 months in advance. And that's important too. If you give someone 4 months in advance and say, right, we're going to do that from the, say it's Christmas. Who wants their rent going up Christmas? So you say, listen, I'm going to, so it's November or October, and you say, we're going to put the rent up, and as of the end of February, it's going to go up there. Someone says, okay. So I'm in their living room, I'm sat down, and I'm drinking tea for the second time, and we run through it. Now, it doesn't take long. I'm not going to sit there for an hour. You might be there just 10 minutes. And again, it's respectful. And someone says, I got it, thank you. And I don't mean 9 times out of 10, but pretty much 49 times out of 50, everything goes as smooth as a nut. The rent increase goes through, and everybody's happy. So when you see or read or hear or watch of people that send out an email, by the way, dear Mr. Tenant, your rent is going up 25% as of Tuesday week, and you wonder why people hate the landlords? See, now this is experience. This is experience. I mean, the other video I made. Be humble. Be respectful. Talk to people. It's people's lives you're playing with, and you can't play with people's lives. That's terrible. I wouldn't like my life played with. Bloody people have, and it's horrible. So I don't like to do it to anybody else. So, in conclusion, primarily, and this is so important, be respectful. You're changing the terms and conditions, not of a contract, but of someone's life. You're changing their life. You're costing them more out of their standard of living. So be respectful how you do it. That's the first and most important thing. So all the regulation of the day can't tell you that. That's how I deal with it. Then, how often should you put it up? Well, what's the market rate? I guess how long is a piece of string? Annually, maybe. Sometimes biannually is really good. It's all according to what the market is like. If inflation is running rampant and everyone's getting, the minimum wage has just jumped to 50 quid a month, an hour, whoop-de-doo. Well, then everybody's rent goes up. So how often? Annually, maybe biannually, or not. Think about the voids. This is business. You're playing with people's lives with business, and the two don't match. So you somehow have to gel that. You have to gel that together. And then, how much? How much is, again, how long is a piece of string? I tend to keep it below market value. Okay, so below market value, and keep it in small increments. Unless there's a change of tenancy. If there's a change of tenancy, all bets are off. So if you've been renting out a flat at 1,000 and that tenant says, thank you very much, but I'm relocating to the north of England, good day, thank you very much, I'm off, bye-bye. And then that new flat has then a market rent of 1,005. Well, great, put it in 1,005 because you've got a fresh tenant, they're coming in, it's completely different. So I'm only talking about existing tenants that are staying. That's it really, guys. In my view, the biggest part of everything I've spoke about today is being respectful. Try to be respectful to people's lives. Let's go get the dogs. Where's the dogs?